how we're gonna get through this meeting. I accidentally give you a rough time. It's because I'm just kind of,
I'm her incarnate, right?
brain memory, muscle memory. Test.
Test.
Don't have the video up yet. Oh, maybe. Oh.
First two, correct? Okay.
Call the work session of the Isabella County Board of Commissioners to order. Stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Madam Deputy Clerk, a roll call, please.
Commissioner Hutchinson,
Here.
Commissioner Engler,
Here.
Commissioner Jelazinski, Commissioner Marino,
Here.
Commissioner Swaney,
Here. Here.
Here.
that for Jelazinski, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's a tough one to say. It took me a while to get that one done myself, but Commissioner Jelazinski had something that come up and he could not attend. He said he will be at the regular session. So next up would be approval of the agenda. We'll start out with general public comments. We have a report from our administrator controller. We have no appointments to boards and commissions. Brings us to committee reports, Finance and Administration Committee.
Mr. Chairman, the Finance and Administration Committee is prepared.
And Human Resource, Criminal Justice and County Affairs Committee.
Justice and County Affairs Committee is all set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Human Resources and Public Works Committee.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have no intergovernmental affairs, no administrator controller issues, no unfinished business under new business. We have a volunteer agreement to consider, and then we'll have another opportunity for general public comment and announcements and adjournment. So with that, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Support.
Been moved and supported. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We have an agenda, which brings us to general public comment. Anyone for general public comment? We have anyone online, Michelle? No, okay. Okay, we'll keep right on moving. To applications and special reports, administrative control report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I missed my last one due to illness. I wasn't here the last meeting in March, so my apologies. So kind of adding that into this, but try not to make it too long for you. So some of these things might seem a little dated, but thank you. I can't remember which commissioner, or maybe a few of you did, forwarded me the information when Frontier reached out to all of you about assistance with the broadband grant that they were seeking. Quite often people will seek commissioners out, but not seek me out. So I appreciate you forwarding that to me so that I can respond. We did do a letter of support for the Frontier Communications rural broadband grant. So that went out in March. I think I copied you guys on it. Recently, we also did a letter of support and working with Jake Borton at the MRF for the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe that recently applied for a solid waste infrastructure for recycling grant. Some of those monies were for tribal recycling operations, and some of what they applied for were actually to help us with some equipment at the MRF. So that was a nice partnership there, spearheaded by Mr. Borton. Thank you for that. Wanted to alert everyone to for a while, we had thought there was going to be some support for the county for our unfunded pension liability. Remember, the state had come out with some grants for municipalities that were, unfortunately, the caveat was you had to be 60% or less funded in order to apply for, be eligible for the grants. I guess good news is we're not eligible for the grants because we're well over 60% funded, although it would be nice to have tapped into some assistance there. I did look at the list of local units eligible, and just wanted to point out there are no municipalities or local units of government eligible in Isabella County, including the county. So I did want to make sure and point that out. I wanted to let you know, of course, the opioid settlement documents have been submitted. I think maybe today was the deadline for that, but they were submitted shortly after your approval last meeting. Good news and Pete Preston just confirmed it with me tonight. He may or may not talk about it, but certainly want to let you know that all of the affected local units, all the township assessors in Isabella County who have wind turbines in their jurisdiction did use the new settlement multipliers that BTE had adopted through the settlement of cases with them. So we have secured and taken advantage of that less aggressive depreciation schedule, if you will. The numbers that you saw last Wednesday at your meeting about the new depreciation multipliers show a little over $1.5 million extra for county operating over the next handful of years. So we're pretty excited about that. One thing I wanted to talk about, and my apologies, Jen Crawford, for not having discussed this with you previously. We've talked about it at this board level. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Is a solution coming? It's actually a solution already in place. We talked about the Commission on Aging Advisory Board and how it's been hard to get representation from some of the districts in the county because that's the way that it was set up. The membership of that board was based off of commissioner district for whatever reason. But the bylaws of the advisory board, we did a little checking and already say that in the circumstance that no suitable representative can be found and appointed within 30 days after the beginning of the term, the county board may appoint a citizen residing outside said district to represent that district. So we are now able to, the next time we do the advertisements for open positions, we'll advertise it such that it still won't be an at large, it's still that district representative, but the way we'll advertise it is that it's basically open to anyone in the county now. So yay, we solved it with no further action needed. So yes. So we'll be doing it that way going forward. If you haven't heard, the feds are ending the public health emergency for COVID as of May 11th, 2023. So we've been diligent to record COVID expenditures since the beginning of the pandemic. We've used certain line items to do so, and we did that to kind of group those expenses so that if any funding became available, we would easily be able to, to identify those. Because they're ending the public health emergency, we are going to be ending keeping track of COVID expenses that way, also effective May 11th. So shortly thereafter, you won't see on your invoice list, you won't see that COVID report at the bottom anymore. With the public health emergency ending, I can't see any more funds being made available for those. So we're going to work smarter, hopefully. The clock is now actually going backwards. That's interesting. Of course it is. Of course it is. Yeah, that would be all right. Just a few other things, wanted to report Phil Hedgepeth from our Employee Assistance Program came to talk to administration. We did an in-service, on the Ides of March, and the next day on the 16th, the same person came and presented some time management, life management skills to the department head and elected group. So I'm hoping that staff took some great things out of that. Something that I forwarded to you all, I wanted to say a big congratulations to Brandy Knievala from the Commission on Aging, by being named as the CMU Social Work Field Instructor of the Year.
Nice.
Brandy, very exciting, exciting stuff. Also very, very bittersweet. Congratulations to Payroll and Benefits Administrator Emma Latosky as she goes on to a new adventure at CMU Human Resources. So we wish her the best. She really leveled up the county in that role. She will be missed. And I just want to throw out a few thank yous on the jail project. Commissioner Embry, you've been very, very engaged, jumped right in that and helped me do some legwork that I didn't have time to do. So I do appreciate that.
Pleasure.
Want to thank our private citizen, Miklos Ferber. Mr. Mike Ferber has been very helpful to me in his advisory capacity on that project. You'll see a volunteer agreement for him later on the agenda. And also want to thank Union Township because they have been a great partner in the project. And I know that we're going to have a successful project. And no, look at the smile. No one's happier for us than Union Township. Glad we're partnering with you in that regard. Are there any questions of me about what's been going on? Coming up. We have a little budget work coming up. Ready for that?
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no appointments to boards and commissions. Brings us to committee reports, Finance and Administration Committee.
Yes, sir. For the Finance and Administration Committee, our first item of business is to consider ratifying and placing on file the March 31st, 2023 invoice list in the amount of $1,321,032.25. The April 7th, 2023 invoice list in the amount of $384,381.39. And the adjustment list dated April 13th, 2023. With regard to the March 31st, 2023 invoice list, we have a $1.1 million payment to Clark Construction for the jail project, a $42,000 payment to MSU for a quarterly MOA payment. And one thing I thought was very interesting was the approximately $10,500 payment to 44 North for prescription drugs, which was significantly lower than what it was the first month. So I do have one question of inquiry for Madam Administrator about the $400 payment to Canadian passport photo for the county clerk. Anything about that?
I do not. I know that they do passport. They perform passport photos at the clerk's office, but I don't off the top of my head know what that payment would be for, but I can certainly look into it and get back to it.
Oh, do we have any questions on the first invoice list? Hearing none, we'll move on to the invoice list for April 7th, 2023. We had a $35,000 payment to Integrated Architecture for the jail project. Roughly $30,800 to BSB Communications for the final payment on the new county phone system, which I hear is working pretty well. Is that correct? You know, and a total of roughly $67,000 to Child, Youth, and Juvenile Care. We had $10,000 to Highfield for one youth, $10,000 to Oakland County for two youths, and a total of roughly $47,000 to McBride Quality Care for non-secure child care. which is what, roughly $67,000 worth of care that we paid out last month. I do have a question regarding the 2 background checks for administration, that totaled roughly $2,000. Can you help me on that?
Grab that. So,
Is your computer volume on, or you get a lot of feedback?
Maybe
So
over my sweater. Do this. Your beard. How's that work? Test. It's better.
okay, so we're on page 2 of 23. I think, about 2/3 of the way down, first advantage background. Do you see under the count, it's admin department because it's a HR function to perform the background check?
Mhm.
Do you see the GL number, how one starts with 288?
Mm-hmm.
That's our Commission on Aging.
Okay.
One starts with 208, that's our Parks and Rec. To make a little more sense, why we would have, we do background checks for new hires, so all the seasonal employees at the parks, and turnover at Commission on Aging, really.
Do they usually run that expensive? I'm not used to my line. Being that
That's for
expensive.
a number of them.
Oh, is it? Okay, not just
yep,
one person?
Exactly. I'm getting into AP right now to check on your $400 question, so I'll look and see, I'll give you some numbers of how many people that might be reflective of.
Okay. Do we have any further questions for the second invoice list? Hearing none, we'll move on to the adjustment list of April 13th, 2023. Here I see the usual prepayments to Gordon Foods and the sheriff area, Sheriff Maine. I did notice the $1 payment to Consumers Energy for the equipment shelter for the sheriff's radio tower project. So kudos again to you, sir. Okay. All the other adjustments were customary, usual course of business items. Commissioners, do we have any further questions on the adjustment list? Hearing none, we'll move these lists forward to tonight's regular board meeting. The second item of business is to consider approving the 2023 equalization reports on the STC Form L-4024 as presented by the Equalization Department and required by the statute, and authorize the chairperson of the Board of Commissioners and the county clerk to sign the same and direct it to be filed with the county clerk's office and with the state tax commission in a timely manner. This is a state mandated yearly report required from the county. I believe is due as of May 1st. Is that correct, Madam Administrator? I think that's what you
May
mentioned.
1st.
May 1st, I believe.
May Day.
May Day. And Madam Administrator, I'm hoping that you can help me with this one. If you can speak to this report and its requirements.
I can help you even more than that by directing your attention to the equalization manager.
There we go.
precedent at the
Even
presenter
better.
table.
thank you. There's
That's why this always comes fast and furious at the meeting.
Local assessors go through the March Board Review, essentially starting in the second week of March. Many times those meetings are either carried over or there's issues after the March Board of Review convenes for them, the assessors to have to go back after they try to balance with our department. And so it does push the envelope for getting that in to us by April 6th, April 6th or 7th, first week of April. So at that point, once our office, and by our office, the primary person tabulating all this is Judy Nisnak, who always does a wonderful job, but to make sure the county is absolutely in balance, that what we get from the local assessing unit not only comes into compliance with our equalization study that we do over the whole year and have done by December 31st, but she also keeps the assessors and our department talking on the same page. So that's why this comes fast and furious, is because it's taking all the local unit information and cramming it into one database and making sure they all balance. So it does push up against this deadline to get to this meeting, and Judy does a good job doing that. There's two forms here that essentially needs to take place, and that's the 3127 Equalization Director certification, and that's for your director, Scott Cunningham, to sign off on verifying that everything has been balanced. The L 4024 is the report from the Board of Commissioners, essentially certifying that this has been done. And then the next thing we'll do is come before you to with the apportionment report and such, and get ready to set your millage for levy during the summer. Then we'll come back to you in September and we'll set the millage or have you spread the values at that time for you to levy taxes in winter on your other millages. So May 1st is not only a deadline for us to submit this to the state, but it's also a tripwire for us to start the equalization study and the process all over again each year. So the 4024 form, it does look a little different than you've seen in the past. This form is now printed from the MEG system. The state has implemented MEG so that the local assessors and equalization department all funnel their information into this system so that we have a little more uniformity among the 83 counties in the state and how many local assessing jurisdictions there are. So that form is fairly standard. I will direct you to the back pages, which does take a little time in our department, but is something I think the Board of Commissioners are interested in. We saw an assessed value or half of market value increase of approximately 7%. As your administrator mentioned, that wind turbines, that the depreciation schedule has been changed to the settlement amount pursuant to conversations that were had with the local units and DTE and some other parties that were involved. That has changed. However, you did see a decrease in that. It is a change in the depreciation schedule, but you still saw depreciation. So overall, your assessed value, half of market, increased 7%, and your taxable value went up approximately 3.3%. Taxable value is that your millage is levied against and what you end up as a county collecting. So on the second to the last page, Judy has outlined here that if you see in the lower right-hand corner and the shaded in green would be the anticipated increases that the county would see by their operating as well as their additional millages there. On the very last page, shaded in blue at the bottom, is just wind pulled out of there. The reason we do that is only because it's become one of the larger impactors to our assessment roll and your taxable value. So that's all I have right now. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Preston?
Just a, okay.
So the last page turbine number, all in total, new multipliers. So the negative number isn't as big negative as it could have been, but it looks like still positive overall.
Yes.
We take the last page and add it to the page before that.
Just out so you can see what the impact of this particular use of property is to the how it's impacting the overall numbers.
Perfect, thank you. It's a good number.
Is that one comment? Mr. Preston, please pass along to Judy our appreciation for her diligent work.
Hopefully she's listening. Thank you.
You're welcome. Gentlemen, do we have any further questions? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move this item. Oh, sorry.
I apologize.
Yes.
The question I think people might ask, so what's the impact to my tax bill? It's gonna go up the lesser of 5% or this,
Right.
not this increase, the state CPI. So we can expect our tax bill to increase by
Well,
5%.
those tax bills already went out and December 2nd. Each individual, if their assessed value went up, their taxable value would only rise at the rate of inflation. So for right now, overall, we're showing a 3% taxable value in for the county. But each individual taxpayer would have seen, again, if their taxable value was less than their assessed, a 5% increase or going up to the assessed, or if they uncapped by purchasing up to the new assessed value. But for next year, that's why we're jumping into our study. Right now, we anticipate that the CPI is going to be heavy for next year again. I mean, this is the first time in many years, if ever happening, that we saw a CPI increase of 5%. Inflation was around 8%. But because of the Michigan cap, it only went up to 5%. Inflation has backed down a little bit, but it's over an annual basis that's calculated. We will know that before you levy your December tax bills, what is anticipated going to happen for the next assessment roll in 2024. So it's a very convoluted system, folks. Sometimes when we trip through these, and we hope to update you as we go along. But for right now, your general public, especially in residential, did see December tax bill a 5% increase in their taxes.
Yeah. So it went up 3.3. Is that the factor? Is it state factor? What was?
State factor is actually 5%.
State factor
Was
is 5.
0.05, yes.
Okay.
Or 1.05, pardon me.
Up that high.
And that we've only had one negative increase. Negative decrease, pardon me. And I believe that was about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was 1.002 of negative of a factor. But again, depending on what the CPI does across the country and what Michigan ends up using their formula for, it's anticipated to still be high for next year. And we had a lot of turnover. Our study period was from March of or April 1st of 2020 to March 31st of 2022. If you remember, that was a crazy time for purchasing property. I mean, we had people bidding on properties and going high, so we had a lot of turnover. What that's looking like now, we'll find out here in about 2 or 3 months. We'll have a better idea of what the latter half of 2022 and the beginning of 23 have on that.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Do we have any further questions? Hearing none, we'll move this item to tonight's board meeting. The final item of business for the Finance and Administration Committee is to consider adopting the Municipal Employees Retirement System, MERS, defined benefit plan adoption agreement, and authorize the board chair to sign the same. This adoption agreement between the county and MERS, if approved, would allow MERS to continue treating lump sum payments to employees, such as the remit payments associated with the COVID-19 essential pay, as compensation to be included in the average final compensation for retirement benefit calculation. County's already established the precedent for allowing this, so this agreement is essentially just a housekeeping measure in nature for the MERS. So something we've always done, and I think it's the right thing to do is to continue the precedent that we've set. Any questions, gentlemen? Hearing none, we'll move this item to tonight's board meeting. This completes the work of the Finance and Administration Committee, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. And that'll bring us to Criminal Justice and County Affairs Committee.
Chairperson Hope, first item is consider approving the payment to Motorola Solutions Incorporated in the amount of 746.80 cents. So just want to see if I could trip up the share. Right. We can add this to the $1.
Yeah.
And then Sheriff May. So this is our first installment for the upgrading communications here in the county. Sheriff May can give you details.
That's how we like to do it. I like to kind of butter you up with the $1 one, then hit you with the other one, right? So here it is. So this one, we had about a 15-minute meeting with Motorola a few weeks ago. They called it their kickoff milestone. We kind of just talked about the project again a little bit and where we were going, and that generated a $450,000 invoice. So that was nice of them. But yeah, this is the grant from the state, the $4.8 million from the state. I think we have the process locked down for reimbursement. Our goal is to get that reimbursed within just a few weeks. Everything's electronic payments and proof. So we'll get that back. Miss Nicole had asked about some scheduling stuff because we're really monitoring that very closely. I just got that in my email, so I apologize. I didn't have it for you earlier, but
That's fine.
kind of breaks down about a 9-step process and kind of where that would fall within the next 18 months of this project. They're roughly around 400,000 each time. There's one that's a little higher, but that'll help us gauge and be able to really see. And it's not 100%, but that'll give us an idea like this is when this one's coming and we can kind of prepare for it and move money if we have to. And hopefully that's a quick turnaround. So that's not a big issue. So this one was the kickoff. I just received some site plan stuff. They were working on all the zoning, FAA, FCC, all those things that involved in doing this at the Mark's shop out there for the dispatch center. So I think we're in good movement here, and hopefully we'll we haven't heard anything on moving the shelter that we purchased for the $1, but I know they're working on transports and cranes and all the things that's going to come with that. So other than that, I really don't, other than we kicked the meeting off, we kicked the project off, and that generated an invoice. So
I know you've been watching the system carefully with the payments back from the state, because we're going to have to move a lot of money back and forth and getting repayment here and keeping the county fluid. Have you seen in that first installment, has the state process moved forward with repayment?
with $1, no, not yet.
Not yet.
I will tell you that as we fine tune this and kind of really realize how this is going to work, our partners at MPSCS, which is the communication system at the state of Michigan, we thought we were going to have to put it into the Sigma grant reimbursement system of the state. That's not the case. Basically, it's a two-party check. MPSCS, I'm the deputy director. I'm not quite sure what her title is, but she'll look at it and say, yes, we approve. I'll say, yes, we approve. I'll bring it in front of you gentlemen, and we will get that final approval there. We'll make the payment, electronic proof, we send that to MPSCS, the deputy director. She puts it into the system right from the state. And I've been told by the people that work for her that she has the juice and she can make it turn around in a couple of weeks. So we're going to hold them to the fire and see if that's the case. So, but we just submitted the $1 one here a couple of days ago. So I don't know how excited they are about doing $1. We'll see. But I marked it off on my calendar that we got $1 from the grant. So
Administrator Frost?
I do have a little bit of housekeeping on this item. When it first made the agenda, I wasn't thinking budget amendment since it's reimbursed, but in order to make those payments, we have to have a budget amendment for the treasurer's office to have everything they need to be secure that you've approved that payment, right? And they're allowed to do so because we have to budget for it. So there is going to be a budget amendment with this item. So hopefully on your regular meeting tonight, we've got a motion here that you can add and amend your agenda, and whoever's going to read it, we've got handout for that motion, just adding this budget amendment 2023-07. So originally we were not going to be the fiduciary, and all this was happening at the state. So it never made it in the budget process, and this will be a reimbursement, but we do have to build in the grant revenue and the expenditures into our budget. So this is really going to level up our FY23 budget, right? I mean, it's great stuff, it's a great program, but that budget amendment needs to happen. Now that cash flow chart, basically, that Sheriff was just talking about on the project, we didn't have that in hand this afternoon when it was time to make this budget amendment, so we've only done it for the cost, the 10% cost to Motorola that's on your agenda right now, plus the dollar that already went to consumers. So we've just done it for the known cost. When sheriff comes forward with the next invoice, it sounds like we'll know, we'll have another budget amendment, but we'll do it through the end of the year so that we don't have a budget amendment every time sheriff comes forward. We'll know from that timeline how much more money is expected to be spent in this fiscal. So myself, the accountants, and Treasurer Pickens and Chief Deputy Treasurer Kathleen Schaefer met this morning to talk about cash flow needs on this project. And we're coming into that time of year when cash flow is a little tighter for the county. So we have a pool of money that we could access for cash flow called our ARPA dollars. If we recognize it. Remember, we can't just take that lost revenue ARPA and put it in our fund balance. We have to apply it to governmental operations. So you'll see me come forward in the next round to ask for that be done. You've seen a forecast with it in the forecast. Let's get it recognized. If we get it in our fund balance, then the treasurer can use that for cash flow purposes. We're going to need it on this project and for the sheriff's office and correctional facility project too. So why not just get that revenue recognized and have the flexibility to utilize it? We can get it assigned or committed at that time too. And we don't have to commit it to the MPSC project because it's coming back to us. We wouldn't necessarily want to do that. I think the commitment will be like to working capital, right? It's for committed to cash flow purposes. Thank you for that.
And you should add that matrix now. And those are, they were clear that it wasn't a hard set. This is the date you're getting billed, but it's a rough estimate, which will help us guide us down the road. So
if we don't do the budget amendment for it, then in the audit, we get written up for not having a big variance in our expenditure. So we'll narrow that down as tight as we can, but we don't want to keep revisiting this with budget amendments with you. We'll try to be efficient.
All right, commissioners, any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move this tonight's agenda. Thank you, Sheriff May. All right, item number 2, consider approving submission of the fiscal year 2024 Michigan Indigent Defense Commission Compliance Plan application. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
How?
So, every year in April, our application for our indigent defense grant under MIDC is due this year at the end of next week on Thursday. A couple things. First, the local share. The local share increases 2.5% this year. So the local share increased. It is now 240,000. 240,000. I'm sorry. $306.09. That's an increase from last year where it was 238,000 and change. It increased that 2.5%. The other change that we've talked about doing in the office now for some time is we've had an open investigator position for some time. We recently did a wage study with the county to determine whether that investigator position, kind of an idea of mine since 2019, was to replace that investigator position with a social worker in our office. Someone that could work with outside agencies, our inpatient facilities, community mental health, things of that nature to better serve our clients with those outside resources that they often need. I think it's a better use of that money. Luckily, it actually came back at the exact same pay grade as the investigator. So it won't impact our ask from the state, and it won't impact the actual dollar amount. And then we can actually move forward with doing it during this fiscal year, as well as including it in our next fiscal year grant. The biggest change that we all know about, I was here back in February regarding Standard 8, and that is salaries for public defenders, as well as the hourly rates that we pay to our contractual attorneys. Part of our plan, just to give everyone a rundown, is our office, the public defender's office, handles 75% of all indigent defense cases with the county. The contract attorneys handle the other 25%. And the reason for that is if there are co-defendants on one case, our office can't represent both people because it's conflict of interest. And so they handle that extra 25%. When Standard 8 was passed, originally when it was written back in 2017, it included the hourly rates that should be paid to those contractual attorneys. And it set out those dollar amounts at $100 an hour for misdemeanors, $110 an hour for felonies, and $120 for life offense felonies. That was when it was originally written back in 2017. That standard was passed in October, and we have to be in compliance with the standard with this application. With this application, they increased those dollar amounts. They increased the rates to $118.21 an hour for misdemeanors, $130.03 an hour for felonies, and $141.82 an hour for life offense felons. Now, one thing I have to correct is when we spoke last week was that a 2% was included on the top of that for a COLA increase. I spoke to my regional director at MIDC today. That's actually not true. That 2% is already included in those rates. So there's not 2% on top of that. That's already incorporated into it. The reason they increase these rates is because they hadn't been increased in 7 or 8 years. So they did that. When we did our grant planning meeting with our regional director, she indicated to me that most counties were actually rounding up those numbers, and they were rounding them up to $120 an hour for misdemeanors, $135 for felonies, and $150 an hour for life offense felonies. They did that for accounting purposes. Most counties are, but it does include that 2%. So I know last week when I said it was 120 plus the 2% and had those $122, it's already wrapped up. So it's the 120, 135, and 150. I reached out to some of our surrounding counties to see if they were doing the rounding up or if they were sticking with the minimum standards. I reached out to Midland, Clare, Gladwin, Lake, Mason, Newaygo, Osceola, and Oceana, and they're all rounding up to the 120, 135, 150. The basis for these hourly rates, and I'll be honest, when you look at them, I see them as being high. But these are people that are self-employed. They're not getting county benefits. They're not getting MERS. They're paying self-employment tax. So you've got to take all that into account with those hourly rates. Some of these cases, life offense cases, I can tell you I've worked on one for the last 18 months. They're time consuming. And so when we look at how we calculate that dollar amount for contractual services, we go back to an original study that was done at the beginning implementation of MIDC that basically looks at, on a misdemeanor, you're averaging about 5 hours worth of work. A felony, 10 hours worth of work. A life offense, 20 hours worth of work. So that's how we come to that calculation for that line item, for that total line item for contractual services. And that's been how we calculated it out since the beginning of our compliance plans. I look at it in regards to the hourly rates. And I believe it was the former Chairman Green that always said, one family could collapse the probate system on the other side. I believe Commissioner Engler, I think you were part of that as well. One family could collapse that. And I know, I look at that in the criminal realm as well. Was, back in 2020, we had a five or six co-defendant homicide case. Luckily, all of them but one had retained attorneys. I was the only public defender on that case. But if we had a situation where they couldn't afford attorneys, we'd be in a serious problem where we'd have to reach out, and we've had to reach out to other counties before to get attorneys on co-defendant cases where we didn't have enough. But if we had that situation again, we'd have to reach out to these other counties to get attorneys. And if we were paying less than this 120, 135, and 150, they might not want to come here. It might not be worth their time if they're making more in their county. They might not want to take a case. So sometimes we have to make that trade on the contract. You know, we've had attorneys from Midland come here. Sometimes we'll have an attorney go there for that issue. But if we're paying less than our surrounding counties, we're going to perpetuate that problem. And I know, you know, we've been here in the past year, 2 years about this attorney shortage that's going on. And I think it's imperative that we keep in line with what at least our geographical area is doing. And part of that is those are the minimum rates. They have set a maximum, which is what federal public defenders are paid. And that is they pay $158 an hour for non-life offense felonies and $202 an hour for life offense felonies. And when I spoke with our regional director this morning, she said that some compliance plans are coming in already with those rates instead. I'm certainly not proposing that, but I think it's important to note that some compliance plans are coming in at that federal level as well.
Commissioner Engler?
Yeah. I know I talked to Commissioner Jelzinski and he has some questions, so I don't know how much we want to go back. I asked Public Defender Hausman to come back for the work session. So I don't know how deep we want to get into it this time. So if it's going to be redundant, it's up to you, Mr. Chairman, but I know he has a lot of questions on this. This is a grant proposal, so we won't know what we get until we actually submit it. So it's not an actual set in stone thing at this point, but it is a grant proposal. Like you said, what is it, about a 70-30 split between what the county pays and what the state will pay. So like I said, I didn't know how deep we wanted to get in. I know Commissioner Jelzinski couldn't be here, so he has a lot of questions. So I don't know if we want to keep going over and redundancy on this. I don't know so I'll leave that up to you and I think public defender for showing up and agreeing to show up later. So I don't know how far in the discussion we want to go with this.
Well, if anyone has any questions right now, I'm certainly welcome to chime in.
I will state that thank you for checking the other counties' rates and what they're doing. That's certainly very helpful for us because we always try to keep aware of making our rates competitive, you know, both in corrections and court and everything, because we see a significant employment issue in the county not keeping up in the past. So it's very, very helpful. And thank you for clearing up the COLA, because I thought that was kind of crazy rounding them and then the COLA makes them odd as well.
I called our regional director this morning. I said, I just want to make sure on this. So
Right.
Caused a lot of confusion, a lot of discussion. So
Right.
So yeah, I'm glad to see that come back differently because we were trying to scratch our head a little bit on that one too. So.
But definitely, thank you very much for coming and you know, gave a very detailed explanation we'll received here. So are there any questions? All right, then I'll move this on to the regular session tonight. Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have consider improving the Equiture Premier Partner Program Agreement for a 5-year period in the total amount of $108,438.50 and authorize the board chair to sign the same. So
I could, Commissioner Engler, just introduce Chad Gittes, one of our operations managers at Central Dispatch 911.
I was checked to see if Mark was on the screen. I didn't see him on there, so
Meeting right now. So
that's what I was looking for. Okay.
I'm
So
sorry, I didn't catch the name.
Yeah,
Nice to meet you.
you can have the floor, basically, yeah, it was, November of 21, I believe, when we started the project, so.
So this one is a computer software program that we use for recording our radio and our phone services at dispatch. So we've been with this company for 15+ years. This is just a standardized contract to 5-year agreement that we've done in the past. That's nothing out of the ordinary, but it's just something that we got to take care of. So.
Yeah, I think the old system is analog, so this is an upgrade that's well needed and forward, so. Pretty standard, what I said, it's been in the works for a while now, so is there any questions? Okay, that was pretty easy. No more questions. We'll move this forward to tonight's business session. Okay. Yes.
Oh,
No, I was thanking the gentleman coming up. Thank you.
He's got to stay
He's
there.
gonna stay for the next one too.
Not leaving yet, so. Okay, next up on our agenda is consider approving amendment number 1 as of March 23, 2023 to the software license agreement dated December 6, 2022 between TAC 10 Inc. and Isabel County Central Dispatch 911 and authorize the board chair to sign the same. This is another upgraded, need to be in compliance with the FBI and the TAC requirements.
Yeah, so.
No cost to us, so
No cost, so that's a good thing. It's just an amendment to the contract reference, the criminal justice information service that we have to tie into the CAD. So again, it's no cost and it's just a standardized procedure that we need to take care of before we get that service into our CAD. So.
basically follows the guidelines, FBI and state of Michigan, so it just brings us, make sure we're in compliance, so. Any more questions? Pretty standard, seeing none, we'll move that forward to tonight's session. And Mr. Chairman, that completes the work of the Criminal Justice and County Affairs Committee.
Thank you, gentlemen. And that brings us to Human Resources and Public Works Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our next item is consider accepting and placing on file the 2022 Isabella County Planning Commission Annual Report as presented. We have
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So we have in front of you the 2022 annual report from the Planning Commission required under the planning enabling legislation. I believe it's section 19. Coming to you a little later than normal. We did not have a meeting in February, and so the Planning Commission didn't see this until March to get their so apologize for the untimeliness. I'm going to run through the document relatively quickly. Page 2 has a table of contents there for you. Section 1 under the introduction talks about the legislation that requires us to provide this to the Board of Commissioners. Again, section 19 of the Planning Enabling Act requires us to do so. Section 2 talks about and lists there our members through the 2022 year. Section 3 discusses the Planning Commission meetings that were held. We did only hold 8 regular meetings and we did have 1 special meeting through the year. It's a little more exciting in a couple of sections here. Section 4 just kind of lays out some responsibilities of the Planning Commission, some bulleted kind of general responsibilities for each one of the Planning Commission members. Section 5 deals with Planning Commission activities. So in section 5, we break that down. 5.1 is Master Land Use Plan Review. As you recall, last year, we brought the master plan back to you for final adoption. So most of last year, or several months, 6+ months of last year, we worked on updating the master plan with regard to some map amendments to the land use plan, as well as updating some of the general demographics from the 2020 census. Section 5.2 discusses site plan reviews. We had 11 site plan reviews that were performed throughout the year. 6 of those were performed by the Planning Commission. 5 of those were performed by staff internally. Back, I believe it was in 2008. We had written an amendment into the ordinance dealing with taking some of our smaller additions, some smaller projects, and not having to hold up contractors or property owners who wanted to make some small modifications and amendments. We could do those in-house rather than sending those to the Planning Commission. Sending it to the Planning Commission about a 6-week, hold up for somebody. So more than half of those these days, we're actually performing in the office within 2, 3, 4 days of them coming in. Special use permits, we only did have one last year. And if you look at the table on top of page 6, we only had one last year as well. We normally average probably in that 7 range from the previous 3 years. You'll see in the same chart. I do believe that the impacts going on in the economy, most of these special use permits are for relatively smaller activities going on out in the country. And I think just the economy, the way the economy was hit, we're just seeing lesser of those smaller startup activities going on. I do believe that'll probably pick up in the years to come, but it has been down for the last 2 years. Zoning amendments, we did 2 map amendments last year, which both would have come to this board for final approval. Review of the township zoning amendments. One of the requirements under the enabling legislation is that we review other jurisdictions amendments. Normally, we only see amendments come from Union Township. That is what we saw last year. We've seen 3 amendments come from them, 2 of which were map amendments, and 1 was a text amendment dealing with solar activity within Union Township. We're also required, Planning Commission is also required to review master plans that come from other communities inside Isabella County and or just outside of us that touch our boundary and borders. Wise Township did provide us with one last year that we did a review on. And we did receive a notice of intent from the city of Clare that they're currently working on theirs. So when they complete it, we'll likely probably review it either late this year or early next year. Farmland agreements, we did review farmland agreements, a total of 17 of those this year in 6 different townships throughout the county. Most of those being the central portion of the county where most of our agricultural land is. It was about 643 acres, so roughly about 1 square mile of land that was reviewed and entered into PA 116. That was a significant increase over 2021, where we did only see 7 applications for about 367 acres. So almost doubled that. Those numbers just kind of flow up and down as contracts expire and people come in and renew. It's really dependent upon the date. It's not a whole lot of new land coming in. It's a lot of renewal, right?
Yeah, I noticed a lot of them were doing trust work. A lot of them were going from single ownership into trust. So a lot of people are doing some estate planning. And so a lot of them, I noticed just about every other third one was a trust. So,
yeah. And so again, those are lands that were likely probably in under single ownership. Now it's going into a trust. So it's not like we've expanded all of that 643, but it is a renewal of a contract in a way through a trust in some cases. Additional activities. This was probably the big thing on the plate for the Planning Commission last year. This is a section 5.8 on page 7 was the completion of the post-construction sound study, which came back showing compliance with our ordinance requirements, which basically let us put that project, that long-going project to rest for the time being. Zoning permits, these are activities that take place from an administrative activity, and function within my office. We did 137 zoning permits last year, which was a touchdown. I think we were about 8 less than 2021. We did do those additional site plan reviews that I indicated previously in the site plan review section, as well as we handle nearly 100 complaints. Complaints are something that we are difficult to track because sometimes a complaint comes in and we can make a call out to somebody or we can send somebody out and it gets cleaned up. Sometimes it gets cleaned up in a couple of days. Sometimes it gets cleaned up in a couple of weeks, sometimes a couple of months, and sometimes it never does. And we end up having to send off to the prosecutor to take, formal action. Zoning Board of Appeals had only 4 applications last year as well, a pretty low number. They did 4 different variances. It was the same number we had the previous year. Our Zoning Board of Appeals, back probably 15, 18 years ago, we were seeing 30 and 40 cases a year. And we're down to this 3 and 4. And I think this is a testament to the work that has been done within the department, as well as by the Planning Commission and this board. We do change our ordinance and make recommendations to change things within the ordinance that we repetitively see variances for. So we have made changes over the years to the ordinance, which I think have lowered the number of variances that people need from our ordinance. So I think that's a good thing over the long term, last 15 or so years. We did know inside or outside training this past year in 22, 21. I did some training with our planning commission in a couple of facets of the ordinance. I did speak at committee that I'm currently working with MMRMA risk management to try to get some other training activities on board for our planning commission members. They don't always like to just hear my voice. They like to hear other voices too, or at least it gives me a little bit of sanity that they hear it coming from somebody else as well. So we're working on that. Hopefully late fall this year, early next year, we should be putting some other trainings on with in cooperation with MMRMA, who does give us grants to do that. We do have some participating costs, but some of that funding will come back from our liability coverage carrier. So that'll be good for us. Planning Commission goals for 23 to continue to review that ordinance and make those changes and those updates so we can continue to see the successes that we have, like at the ZBA. The second one there is to continue to look at that solar. As we know, solar has been talked about quite a bit in recent years. We just want to make sure that we're ready for, and our language and our ordinances are ready for solar. And then one of the big things in our master plan update from 22, which we updated the survey, was communication with the townships, communication with those township officials. It's been a goal of ours to find better ways to communicate with them over the years. And what we've done is we have a mailer list that they get copies of our agendas, they get copies of our minutes, they go directly to supervisors. They also go to the clerks in some cases when we have activity functionally going on within their township. So they see and they know what's going on. As well, we have an open agenda item on every planning commission meeting for township concerns. We do get a couple townships that participate at every meeting, but there is a specific agenda item there that we're there to hear from those townships to know what they're looking for or what concerns they may have. So that was section 9 of the document. That's all we have for the annual report. I'd take any questions if you had them.
Go ahead.
Sure. I know that post-construction sound study is of particular interest to some folks in the county, and maybe for those folks that haven't been part of the discussion, could you kind of walk us through how that it was pretty extensive study. I'm wondering if you can kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, I sort of put it to rest, so I'm gonna shake the head a little bit to get back in there. So post-construction sound study was essentially a study that was set up utilizing standards of our ordinance, utilizing a third-party vendor selected by our planning commission, not by the company that installed them, so that we could have some independency there. Paid for fully by the applicant upfront, so the county expended no dollars on this of their own. The report was basically to take a sampling around the project area, which was quite extensive, covering 5.5, 6 townships in area, to ensure that we had that compliance. What we did was we first sat down and kind of looked throughout the project area to find areas where we had turbines that were potentially contributing close to non-participating property lines. So where was it potentially going to be the worst impacts for us? I think we had 50 some areas that were pointed that rose to that level. We assessed those to find and make sure that we were covering the sampling in all 5 townships so that we had good coverage. So when we got down to the end, we did 14 sites, which was 10%, which was what the requirement that we went into this we were looking for. We did have them come up and independently set up monitoring stations and record data and collect data for us. And for them to be able to analyze, to make determinations on whether or not they were within the decibel level that the county required. It is an extensive document, 170 some pages, I believe. Much of it is data, but the summary, general kind of summary, executive summary of the document did study that all 14 sites were within compliance of the zoning requirements, which allowed us to sort of put that to rest. It was there were several dates of study where we were actually listening for. Mother Nature didn't really cooperate with us real well because there are standards that the wind had to be at a certain speed up at the hub so that we would get this thing up to maximum power. And at the same time, we had to have it low enough down at the ground so that we weren't just taking on wind noise in the microphones. So I think they were here, I want to say they were here 3 times watching this Good Michigan weather forecast. And each time they came in, I think we only ended up being able to collect 1 site. So we kind of maneuvered and went to a hybrid option after working with our attorney. And the hybrid option was basically they were going to set up recording activity and devices so that they could record over a longer period of time. During that period of time, nobody was sitting on site with them, but we were still monitoring the wind levels to know when we had to shut the turbines down and turn them on, because we had to get noise levels ambient. So we needed them all to be off at that time at that recording location. And then for a 15-minute period so that we could collect ambient noise, and then so on, we would turn them on to collect. So it was quite an extensive activity. There's quite extensive amount of data there. But I've read through the entire thing, I think probably 1.5 times. Because by the time I got through it, the second half of the time, I sort of was understanding it all. But each section really does coordinate itself back to that executive summary showing full and complete compliance with our ordinance. Now, saying that means at that time we had compliance. We still anticipate that there will be a blade failure that'll put off a whistle that's going to, set the noise level up a little higher, is going to agitate and irritate somebody. And they're going to call, and we're going to have some independent, work that we're going to have to do to ensure that that's cleaned up and moved towards compliance. But that's just like any use, any activity that we have. There's always, post compliance activities that do go on. So right now we're happy and satisfied. We haven't heard any complaints in our office since the project has been completed with the sound study, and heard very little beforehand. DTE's been a great partner at this time in taking care of any complaints that we have had. And we've had a few, shadow flicker complaints. We've had a few noise complaints, and they always seem to be on it and trying to rectify that and make sure they're in compliance with our ordinance.
Thank you.
I'd like just to say thank you so much for doing that study. I think it illustrates our concern and responsiveness to our constituents in this matter. And I hope all you out there who are watching can see that we do take your concerns seriously and go for compliance and try and make everything as smooth as we can.
Due diligence on our part is a very important thing for us.
I just want to thank Tim, working this whole forum through the workshop. And it really does help when you're a commissioner in an area where you have so many different townships and that they're working with the townships. And it really helps. It really does.
Thank you.
Yeah, a little bit of question. I'm still trying to understand a little bit on this, and it has to do with the solar energy. And you had a review of the zoning amendment with Union Township. Now, Union Township has its own zoning. So how does that partnership work? I know Deerfield has its own zoning, and
so the state law requires those units of government within the county who have their own jurisdiction to send those, either if there is a county planning commission, send those to the county planning commission for sort of a review and advisement. What we do in those cases is we take a look through it, staff takes a look through it, basically makes recommendations down to the planning commission. Sometimes, we might catch something that we might say, hey, you might want to take a look at this with your legal counsel because it's something we've experienced before. Many times when it comes to maps or different uses, we look at those contiguous boundaries. So where Union Township ends, Isabella starts, for 6 miles. And we want to ensure that what's going on in Union is going to be compatible and compliant with what's happening on the other side in Isabella. So they don't have to listen to us, but the state law does require them to actually come to us for a review. It's sort of a partnership. It's the same all the way around us. When we did our master plan, we had to send our master plan to every county that surrounded us, and then every single township within those counties so that they knew what was going on within Isabella County. And it's a similar thing with the amendments coming out of Union. Yep.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll put this on the agenda for this evening. Thank you. Jim.
Okay, our second item, consider approving the reduced rate processing fees in the amount of $45 per ton for clean material and the amount of $70 per ton for material above 10% contamination for Mid-Michigan Industries business recycling for material brought to the Isabel County Material Recovery Facility. And we have our facility director, Jake Ford.
Right. What I'm bringing forward for you this evening is we wanted to set a processing fee for Mid-Michigan Industries. But we also can take into consideration the fact that Mid-Michigan Industries uses a challenged workforce to work towards a gainful employment. So that is a reason why we are asking to set a reduced fee. Our processing fees as it is right now through the facility is $60 a ton for clean material, and above a 10% contamination level is at $85 a ton. So we're asking to set a $45 a ton processing fee to Mid-Michigan Industries, which is that reduced rate. So it would be at $45 a ton for clean material coming in. And if there is a 10% above a 10% contamination, it would be at $70 a ton. Now, I also want to state that, since I've been there, the 11 years that I've been there, Mid-Michigan has been bringing material in. I don't believe I've ever seen them have above a 10% contamination level. So realistically, it's going to be the $45 a ton, but we want to follow the same structure that we have with everyone that brings material in, and that's that there is that 10% contamination level that we can charge if it is needed. And that how that's determined as far as contamination level is that's just an observation between whether it's my operator or my operations manager would assess that material that's coming in to decide whether it is above a 10%. And we also discuss with the driver if it if it really does look like it's the potential for something to be above that contamination rate. So.
How many years ago did we start the separate fee structure for?
From what I can remember, I think it was in 2019 when that went into place. We have, and we have not charged at this point. We had not charged Mid-Michigan Industries a processing fee, but we are bringing it to the table now. As you can see, the amount of material that I'll use last year's, for example, but they rung in 137.6 ton or 60 tons. So they're looking at a possibility if it was assessed at the $45. You'd be looking at $6,183.80 is what they would be billed out. Now, that would be billed out every month is what it would be billed out. So it is, it's not like they're going to get hit with one solid bill on that. So
that turned out to be a pretty good program as far as trying to get material cleaner through the facility.
It does.
Goes
that
up
is
and down, but
that is one of the biggest things that it does help us with by setting processing fees and them having the understanding that, if you come in above that 10% mark, it's a $25 cost increase. In this case, it would only be a $15 cost increase, but it does reduce the amount of residual. And I reference what you would consider trash, but we reference it as residual percentages. So we try not to use the word trash in the recycling industry. So, but it's for that reason. So.
That being said, too, the Mid-Michigan Industries came to the workshop and really want to thank us for what we've done for them. And they appreciate everything we can do for them in the future too. And this helps, really does help their employees with training and going through the whole process.
Fact that they're trying to get, reach a gainful employment, and that training helps that. So we feel it's important to be able to continue to try and give back to the community in that nature and that reduced fee.
Thank you. Okay. Our next item is consider approving government rental equipment expiring December 31st, 2025 for the rental of a New Holland tractor with backhoe at the rate of $15 per hour for Isabella County Parks and Recreation, and authorize the board chair to sign the same. We have Miranda Walker, Parks and Recs interim director, here to give us the background on this. Hi, Miranda.
In 2021, the Parks Department began utilizing a government rental program through Allen's Equipment for the rental of a New Holland tractor. This tractor is used for maintenance at Coldwater Lake Family Park. Coldwater is open from May through early October. So because of this, we feel leasing a tractor versus buying a new one is more beneficial to our department. Especially because we are only being charged for the hours that we are putting on the machine. So last year we put about 72 hours on the tractor. This year we're anticipating about 100 hours, and that would be at about $15 an hour. Some of the other benefits are that we get a brand new tractor every year, which is really nice. Repair costs are included in the rental, which minimizes our maintenance expenses. So we are requesting to continue utilizing this government rental contract, and we would like to extend it to be through 2025, so for 3 years.
Okay, any questions or comments on this item?
Just one comment. This is close to the park, and we're not going to find a better rate. Okay, you don't have to buy the park.
Win-win.
Win-win deal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Commissioner Engler?
Yeah, and I kind of look through this a little bit, but you said use it. Was there a minimum on that lease agreement, or they kind of waived that at Allen's?
There was a minimum when we first signed on back in 2021, but there is no longer a minimum, and that is stated in the contract that it is just for the hours that we actually put on the machine. Is no.
That's a nice addition, because most of the time you have to pay a minimum tractor rental. So
That first year we had to pay 150 hours, but we no longer need to do that.
great,
Yeah.
I can get that deal.
Okay, that concludes the work of the Human Resources and Public Works Committee, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Miranda. Now, I'm all set.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have no intergovernmental affairs, no administrator controller issues, no unfinished business. Under new business, item A, we're going to consider approving the volunteer agreement between Michael Sperber and Isabella County to set the parameters of his involvement in all aspects of the construction of the Isabella County Sheriff's Office and Correctional Facility, and authorize the board chair to sign the same. And you want to speak to that?
Sure, I certainly can. You all might remember Mr. Ferber. who came to speak at public comment some time ago, Commissioner Embry. Maybe it was prior to your joining us on the board, or you were here. Great. Great. So you'll remember him. You'll remember that the county has experience with him in the building of this facility that we're sitting in right now. A very positive experience. He's retired now, but he owned a construction management company, I think, for close to 40 years. Started out working for Barton Mallow prior to that, rose to second lieutenant status in the U.S. Army, and he's been tremendous help to me. He's offered his services, as you heard him here that day. He's got expertise in construction where I certainly don't. You know, he's able to look at the billings and point out things to me that I wouldn't have seen. So we're wanting him to start joining us on the construction progress meetings and owner architect meetings on the project. And Sheriff had some concerns. The sheriff is suspicious by nature, and we want him to be. And so he just thought it important, rightfully so, to set some parameters around Mr. Ferber's involvement. The volunteer agreement before you was prepared by County Attorney Tim Perrone. Sheriff has seen the agreement, and it says that it speaks to any concerns he had. So Mr. Ferber's already signed the agreement, and Chairman was gracious enough to allow this issue to come right to work session rather than through committee, which would hold up him attending meetings a couple more weeks. So does anybody have any questions?
I have some. What didn't me close didn't he work on this building here?
Did, yes, back in 2008, it was his firm, and I apologize for not being able to recall the name of the firm, but the Board of Commissioners and I think there was a committee on the COA building at the time, worked very, very close with Mr. Ferber, and certainly a very successful project that this facility has been.
You have a question?
Ms. Andrew.
Okay.
Or commented on.
Just a comment. I just want to thank Mr. Ferber for donating his time. Very much appreciated. Commissioner Engler.
Real quick through this. I'm sure it's in there someplace, but liability, he goes out to the site. Steps in a hole.
So there is a release that I guess the last one is a hold harmless from any and all liability, including bodily injury. And so generally,
Including body land, okay.
yep.
Okay.
So I feel like that is covered. Mhm.
Any other questions? All right, we will consider that this evening. And that brings us to general public comment. Anyone for general public comment? Michelle, do we have anyone online?
I will speak. If
Sure.
you want me do you want me to go up there? Can I sit right here?
Speak from right where you are, I think.
Thank you. I wanted to speak to Commissioner Embry's questions just so that the answer was in the same meeting. I did find the invoice to Canadian passport photos from our county clerk, and there's $375 for what's called a passport media kit, and that contains one ribbon and paper to make 300 photos. And there's also a $25 shipping charge. It is out of Canada, Markham, Ontario, interestingly enough. And then on the First Advantage background check, just to give you an idea of how many checks were run, and this new First Advantage background check kind of has an a la carte of, boy, do you just want a social security verification or do you want the full fledged, right? So I can't really tell you, I don't want to say how in depth a lot of these went, but there were 5 for parks and 32 for Commission on Aging. And that's part of, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's your Region 7 audit every year. It requires maybe every 3 years. These were actually on our employees. And every 3 years, we're required to do continual checks because they work with the sensitive population out here at Commission on Aging. So great question to help us all learn and understand a little more. So 37 total background checks of some sort on their invoice. So yes, you're welcome very much.
Thank you for that quick work on that. Any other general public comment? Seeing none. Announcements, commissioners, do you have any announcements?
I don't think you can use this meeting as a record comparing on your time management just because of the clock. So, so you don't get away with it.
Okay. Noted. Yeah, this meeting took less time than. Actually, time went backwards. It never feels that way though. Okay, any other announcements? And pardon me? Oh, yep.
Helicopter rides or.
Okay, anything else? And hearing nothing further, is there a motion to adjourn?
Support.
Moved and supported. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
5:25.